Whatever happens, good luck.
Whatever happens, happens. That's how we start off our shows. Welcome to Good Luck.
Becoming Da Vinci.
The Becoming Da Vinci show is sponsored by the Kinetic Experience, where entrepreneurs go to have even more success and more fun in their business and life.
Becoming Da Vinci.
So to learn more about the Becoming Da Vinci show, visit us at www.becomingdavincishow.com, where you can learn all sorts of stuff about Leonardo da Vinci and what we are doing to correlate his life and his example with modern-day entrepreneurs and self-directed learning.
Becoming Da Vinci.
Becoming Da Vinci. We have here Miss Amelia. She's chilling. She's some of the reason that we're doing this epic podcast. I'm Abe Nadimi.
I'm Jannica Morton.
So, like all babies, she's probably not going to cooperate now that we need her to cooperate, but she's been chilling here on my leg for like 30 minutes. So, we're going to get started. I love to say that this particular, I think maybe one or two episodes, we're going to really look at this particular book. This book is Leonardo da Vinci by Walter Isaacson. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely incredible. And the intro chapter is just such an amazing chapter around Leonardo da Vinci, curiosity, inspiration,
innovation,
so many awesome things. And so you're going to see us read a lot from our iPads today as we really take and share with you some of the information right out of the book. So diving right in. So the goal of this particular episode is to share with you some of the facts related to Leonardo da Vinci, an overview of him and some of the highlights of his life, and specifically as it relates back to self-directed learning and entrepreneurship. And so that's where we start kind of tying those elements in. If you listen to any of our mini episodes, you would know that that's kind of the reason that we're so inspired by him and other individuals like him that have been around. So one thing that I saw here is that I kind of gathered this list of Da Vinci from different parts of the book, which was his innovation, his wildly imaginative, so excitable that it flirted with the edges of fantasy, passionately curious, and creative across multiple disciplines, his experimentation and his observation. And here's a quote: Leonardo's genius was so human, wrought by his own will and ambition. And I think that's amazing.
I love that one.
Because we'll get to this a little bit later as Walter Isaacson actually compares Da Vinci with Einstein. And I think,
well, with Einstein and the others, he calls them that they have this, like, what is the word? Magical or no?
Supercomputer type brains.
Yeah,
basically.
But it's like a gift from God type of thing. Like their brains are just something that you can't compare to, whereas Da Vinci, he felt, was not that. It was just something he worked at becoming, which boggles my mind because he had to have natural talent.
Obviously had natural talent, but it's different.
Yeah,
and that's
it's a different machine.
The beautiful part about Da Vinci and why he can be so inspirational to so many of us. Because again, as it says, that his genius was one that was created by his own will and ambition. And, all of us can develop that will and ambition in us.
No, that's what's exciting, because if you have the interest in something, then you can create it. And he shows that.
So I embarked on this book. So this is what Walter Isaacson is saying right at the beginning, right? I embarked on this book because Leonardo da Vinci is the ultimate example of the main theme of my previous biographies, which obviously, man, I want to go read a bunch of them. I had read his Steve Jobs book, but I want to read Benjamin Franklin next, and then he says, it's how the ability to make connections across disciplines, art and sciences, humanities and technologies is a key to innovation, imagination, and genius. Man.
That's the line right there.
That is the line.
Yeah. Innovation, imagination, and genius.
It is so beautiful. And so you think back on who he's describing, these are the characteristics of him. Mm-hmm. And I think that's phenomenal, because if you look at the way life is today, it is about those that are most successful right now driving innovation, or they're making those cross-disciplinary connections, right? And so I remember Steve Jobs saying that that Apple was essentially at the crossroads of art and science.
Mm-hmm, something like that.
Art and technology.
Well, it's in the book. He quotes it in the book.
Let's see.
I don't know if it's in our notes.
Yeah, liberal arts and technology. That's right.
No. He saw both. He saw beauty in both art and engineering. But the intersection of liberal arts and
maybe technology. You don't argue when I literally pull it off our notes.
Whatever.
That's why we have notes. Mm-hmm. But so moving right along, we have Benjamin Franklin. This is the first one that he describes in the book. And he says that he was the Leonardo of his era. So everybody knows Benjamin Franklin was considered one of the founding fathers of the country, played an instrumental role in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the formation of America. So he says Benjamin Franklin was the Leonardo of his era. With no formal education, he taught himself to become an imaginative polymath who was Enlightenment America's best scientist, innovator, diplomat, writer, and business strategist. He proved by flying a kite that lightning is electricity, and he invented a rod to tame it. He devised bifocal glasses, enchanting musical instruments, clean burning stoves, charts of the Gulf Stream, and America's unique style of homespun humor.
I didn't know he created musical instruments.
Well, we got to find out which ones
I'm going to have to read this one, yeah.
And that's the cool thing about this particular podcast is that we obviously are inspired and are covering Leonardo da Vinci, but it's from Leonardo da Vinci that we get to cover other individuals.
Yes.
Like Benjamin Franklin, and understanding those different elements about his life, this creation of these enchanting musical instruments, what that's about, right? What is that about?
Right.
So he does end up talking a little bit about Einstein here, which we can hop over now because we'll get to him a little bit later. Of course, Ada Lovelace. Mm-hmm. You want to read that one?
Isaac Walterson profiled her as I could read.
Do you need your glasses?
No. I zoomed it in, but I didn't read it. So in his book, Innovators, he combined the poetic sensibility of her father, Lord Byron, with her mother's love of the beauty of math to envision a general-purpose computer. I didn't know that.
Isn't that amazing? So women in tech is such a big conversation now.
How did I not know that?
When you think about that there have been already these amazing women in technology and in science.
Right.
It's pretty epic. So I recently doing some work on a different project and stumbled upon this book series called Rebel Girls. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that they're highlighting is these kind of women. So I think it's pretty awesome. Now, of course, Steve Jobs here. Leonardo was his hero. He saw beauty in both art and engineering, Jobs said, and his ability to combine them was what made him a genius. Mm-hmm.
I would totally agree with that.
Absolutely. And that's really interesting, right? So here is where Walter Isaacson, and obviously in this case, Steve Jobs, describe Leonardo's genius as his ability to combine different subjects and his will to figure them out. As we'll discuss here today, he wasn't really set on a path that would normally have allowed him to you would think, wow, that is not the right path for an individual of a middle-class family. So Leo's life, this is right out of the book, word for word. And this is really interesting because of what Walter Isaacson does when it comes to connecting the 15th century to today. So the 15th century of Leonardo and Columbus and Gutenberg was a time of innovation, exploration, and the spread of knowledge by new technologies. In short, it was a time like our own. So when he says new technologies and the spread of knowledge, what I have so far gathered is really discussing the printing press that came out, I think, in 1450, and how all of a sudden information was becoming more readily available. So that was a major achievement.
That must have been a huge thing for them to experience.
And then he continues, that is why we have so much to learn from Leonardo. His ability to combine art, science, technology, the humanities, and imagination remains an enduring recipe for creativity, which I love. I love that line because it describes the process of even growing your own creativity, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just some inherently born thing as much as something that could be cultivated by exposure to different subjects and giving oneself the opportunity to then combine them in unique ways.
It's the basis of self-directed learning.
Absolutely.
Because you have to start with imagination which leads to the creativity, and the curiosity, which leads to diving into all the things that interest you. And for him, it seemed to be everything interested him.
Everything interested him, apparently. So too was his ease at being a bit of a misfit. And I like how he says bit of, when I think it was like a full-on card-carrying misfit. Illegitimate, gay, vegetarian, left-handed, easily distracted, and at times heretical. So the left-handed one is interesting because he did something called mirror writing, which he actually wrote as though it would appear in a mirror.
Yeah. How do you
And
do
he was
that?
left-handed. So talk about a misfit, 100%, right?
Right.
So that's really interesting. So that kind of sets a little bit of a era in which Leonardo da Vinci was born. And so here are some of the details. We won't get like really into this particular part of his life, like the details of his life, because this podcast is not only about Da Vinci. It's not a historical, like we're not just about Leonardo. So we do want to give some highlights about his life from the fact perspective, like this is when he was born and so forth. But we really want to know, what did he do? What did he live? How did he learn? And how can we apply some of those principles?
Well, also to tie his life to the lives of today. So just that one statement of that he was a bit of a misfit. All of those things still classify you today as a bit of a misfit.
Absolutely. You're right.
I don't know that any of them.
I feel like I'm a big misfit because I'm a vegetarian. That's not true.
You're a big misfit for lots of reasons.
9 years, actually. 9 years, like 2 weeks ago, I became a vegetarian. So born April 15, 1452. So that's tax day in the United States. And I don't think they're related, but maybe. No way, right?
No.
So he was born in a city or little village, which is still there. It's called Vinci. So Da Vinci means that he's from Vinci. He was born about 10 p.m. on April the 15th, 1452. And Vinci is about 17 miles west of Florence. So any of those people that have been to Florence, Vinci is really, really close. So the story goes, not the story, the facts, that he was born to a man named Piero and a woman named Caterina. So Piero was from a family of notaries.
Middle class.
Definitely middle class, which is a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Always a good thing. So he's comes from a respectful family, and Piero meets a woman, like I said, Caterina, who at 14 she was an orphan. She was orphaned at 14, and raised by her, I think, maternal mother. Piero meets her.
Her maternal mother?
Maternal grandmother. So Piero meets her, and she gets pregnant and, of course, has a baby when she's about 16 years old. And what's really interesting is a baby out of wedlock, normally in this time, or in a lot of different times in history, is not something that you would have a chance to progress in society. But he was born, and I say in quotes, the golden age for bastards. And that's actually cited and described from a different author, and that was cited by Walter Isaacson in this book. So he was raised by both his mother and Piero's father. So they actually kept on really close ties. So although he was born in this illegitimate environment, when he was born, I think he was born on a Saturday, there was a huge baptism ceremony at the local church. I think 10 different godparents were there. So it was a big deal. So it wasn't like they were trying to put this in hiding. So it was a totally different era when Da Vinci was born. And so, but nonetheless, his dad still continued to go back to Florence and work on that following Monday. So baby's born Saturday. Leonardo is born on Saturday. His family accepts him, meaning his extended family accepts him. They have this big event on Sunday, and then his dad is back to work on Monday. And what it seems to have happened is that his dad's family, they were the ones with money and so forth. They arranged a situation where he could live close by in another little, somebody else's farm, essentially. It looks like Piero's dad had found another man to marry Caterina, and thus she was taken care of to some degree, and Leonardo was around. So what's crazy, though, is that although he was illegitimate, because specifically in the guild that they were in, the family of going to being a notary, in that particular group, it was not allowed that you would be an illegitimate child.
Right.
So you could do other things and be middle class and have opportunities, except the specific one that his family was tied to, which I think that's really crazy.
No, it's the best thing that happened to him.
I think so too, because of that, he wasn't able to go to classic schools. He wasn't able to get a classical education, and it changed everything for him. And so all of a sudden, he was able to direct his time through self-directed learning. And what's really interesting is, based on the paragraph that we started with, this whole section, is that by being in Florence at a time when creativity was being rewarded, here's an individual that is born in an environment that he has opportunities in a sense, but yet he's not ingrained into society the same way everybody else would. And so now his creativity that he nurtured through his self-directed learning, through his use of his imagination and combining his interest in art and science and so forth, actually gets to be rewarded, which is like, what a recipe for success.
Right.
Or at least the foundation is laid for him in a way that is really unique, considering what tiny little things would be different, and he would never have had the opportunities that he had to express himself.
It's crazy because like we studied that he was outside yet inside the family and the community, so he was in both. So you think through that, and the type of person I would assume he was from his art and from his writings and such. Imagine the thought processes that he went through in thinking just like family events. Was he part of them? Was he not part of them? And if so, was he sitting there on the outskirts and watching everyone and studying them, like how their robes hang or their clothing hangs, or was he really part of and interacting with them? Like just thinking through that part of who he was on a day-to-day basis.
It must be phenomenal, because he did spend time in his paternal family's house.
Right.
So it wasn't like...
Yeah, but he was still an outsider.
That's
so
right.
How do you...
And he had a good relationship with his dad, because it does say that when he signed up to be part of the Guild for Artists, that he actually signed his name, Leonardo di Ser Piero da Vinci. So he actually cited that I'm from this person, Piero, which is amazing. So in 1468, he signs up to do an apprenticeship with a friend or acquaintance of his father named Verrocchio. So he was born in 52, and in 1968, so right approximately, he's 1468. Right about that time, he is now an apprentice. So you're talking about 16 years old. Now, his apprenticeship ends officially in 1472 at the age of 20, but he decides to continue to work there and to gain experience being there with Verrocchio, even though he was technically now considered a master painter and could technically move on having done his apprenticeship, which I think is a phenomenal way and something that we discuss a lot when it comes to education. So you have a 14-year-old that comes in, quote unquote, graduates at 20, right, and continues to work inside the company. And all of the time, he is providing value to Verrocchio, even though he's getting lessons too.
Yes.
Right? So that's really amazing. And when I say provide value, I mean literally working on some of the projects that Verrocchio's studio has been commissioned to do. So his first publicly known work of art is the small contribution he did to Baptism of Christ. So in that painting, he actually is attributed with painting the left angel. So if you pull that up on Google, you'll find the left angel is actually different.
Right. You can see the strokes and the flow of it.
Especially it's the hair. The hair is particularly different in the way lighting is done on that angel. And so that one is Leonardo's first publicly known artwork. And we actually learned that watching a documentary, I think it was the History Channel, I think we grabbed it on YouTube.
Yep.
Really, really crazy. That altogether, he's attributed with 15 paintings.
So that's what I want to find out. Like that piece, does that count as one of his paintings, even though he just did the angel?
That's a good question. But it's insane if you think about it, how little, for a person who died when he was 67. So right, he starts off 16 years old in an actual apprenticeship, and he dies when he's 67.
Yeah, and he only has 15 paintings.
And he only has 15 paintings attributed to him. Now because so many people think of him as just a painter, but he did so much more than that, which we'll discuss, obviously, throughout this podcast. And a lot of the information that we get on Leonardo is actually through his notebooks. And that's where, and we actually have so many of those notebooks are still available to be seen and studied. And that's where a lot of the genius comes in, or that we can see the way he approached different things.
So I think that looking at the death of Leonardo da Vinci and using his life as an example for our generation, future generations, and looking back at the innovators of our times and the times before, we can look at what are the pieces that connected all of it together. And what Walter Isaacson says in his book, that common piece that crosses against the multiple disciplines, it ties back to innovation, imagination, and genius. And I think that a takeaway for people at home that they can do, or in the office or with their teams or whoever, is to think through how you create across the different disciplines, whether it's art and science or technology and crafts, or is it chemistry and cooking, whatever it is, just to connect those back. And then let us know.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I would really love to know what kind of ways that you think of, or you're bringing cross-disciplinary learning or activities in your life. So please reach out to us at hello@becomingdavincishow.com, or of course find us on Instagram at becomingdavincishow.
Or our website.
I always forget that. becomingdavincishow.com. Thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.
Becoming Da Vinci.
All right, so this is our little show and tell section for individuals that are interested in doing podcasts or creating videos. We just want you to know that what we actually did in this episode is we filmed the whole episode. And then we realized, like, oh my gosh, this is way too long.
Yeah.
And we realized there was a natural stop in place after Da Vinci had passed away. And when we talked about how he died. And so at that point, we actually came back, refilmed a closing for the second, closing for what would become the first episode, and then create an intro for what would be now episode number 2. So just so you know that there is, it's when you're creating something like this, there are ways that you're going to be able to fix things afterward. Mm-hmm. And we want to share with you that journey in what we call the show and tell section, so that you don't have to be perfect to make this happen. And whether some people would be upset with us, but we like to polish, or if you're watching the video, you can clearly tell by the sun position here on the blinds that we're at a different time. It is what it is. And I think it's better that we give ourselves permission to actually work and be better, and we're happy to do that in front of you.
And also, we researched some stuff that I didn't know. I assumed, made it just from my experience of history and art, that just made assumptions. And so when we were talking through things, I asked questions and didn't know the answers to them. So we looked those up and then had to refilm those pieces. So yeah, you have to learn.
It's definitely a work in progress.
That's what life is. We're studying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to put this out there. If you know anybody that should be covered on this show, please let us know. We're looking for people that are innovative, whether they have a business or not. Maybe they're a school teacher. Maybe they're just that cool grandma down the street that has just really figured out how to make amazing tomatoes grow in her backyard. So we're looking for self-directed learners. We're looking for innovative people who are always learning and trying new things. So please reach out to us at hello@becomingdavincishow.com.
Hey, thank you for tuning in to the Becoming Da Vinci Show. Join us next time as we learn more about Leonardo and modern-day entrepreneurs.
Becoming Da Vinci.